I'm going to be talking about some of the names on this Coggle list entitled Sovereign Citizen Infiltration, and as well I'll be covering something called ISED Canada, formerly known as Industry Canada. It got a name and structure change in the year 2015, I believe. So, first off, I want to talk about Jeremy Mackenzie and Diagolon a little bit. So, Jeremy Mackenzie has some interesting friends like Maxime Bernier over here, and his girlfriend appears to be indifferent on the matter as well. That's Morgan May over there. So, Maxime Bernier, I've already spoken about him in various videos in the past, and I've even questioned him as well about something called the social economy, which is basically like Canada's version of Agenda 2030. So, the reason why I'm just going back and forth here is because Jeremy likes to hide in plain sight, doing Masonic symbolism here. We call that the hidden hand, I guess. And he hides using a veil of comedy. We inducted ourselves into the Reptile Freemason Illuminati using Philip's connections, and there's a picture of a goat, and Philip is their goat, which we'll get to as well, their sort of mascot, and how that represents something called the Baphomet. So, to explain the sign here, my words are Shem, Japhet, and Adoniram. My sign is this. It is an imitation of one given by God to Moses when he commanded him to thrust his hand into his bosom, and taking it out, it became as leprous as snow. My word of exoration is explanatory of this sign and is found in the writings of Moses, 4th chapter of Exodus. So, exoration is like an utter sense of importance. And the Lord said unto Moses, And the Lord said unto Moses, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand in his bosom, and when he took it out, behold, his hand was leprous as snow. So everything within Freemasonry, and by the way, this is called the Royal Arch degree. I'm not sure what numeric degree that is in Freemasonry offhand, but what I could tell you is that everything that Masons do all revolve around death or penalties revolving around severe pains, disembodiments, and disgusting things of that nature. So when you work with blood, even on a metaphorical level, you're essentially bringing in bad mojo is my outlook, and even if you don't agree with that, the thing is doing secret handshakes or secret signs that signal things to one another puts you at a spot of great advantage in the business world, legal world, corporate world, and all of that, which is not even fair. Not that those are even things built for us. The reason why I'm just showing this picture of the Baphomet here is so you know what I mean, and you can see the as above, so below symbolism with the two hands, and as well the Catius or Catechus, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but that symbol in the center there is commonly seen actually on ambulances and in hospitals. So, to kind of define what it is here, according to Manly P. Hall, he said it's not the Christian devil, but a symbol of ancient alchemists representing nature, and nature's God being a combination balance of forces, light and darkness, which is actually an accurate description, despite Manly P. Hall being a Freemason. That is accurate. So, the Baphomet, whom Templars were accused of worshipping, is a goat-headed deity, being formed of both male and female principles, with a Catechus of Mercury in Opus of its phallus. So, one arm points down, with the Latin solve et coagula written on them, meaning flow and ebb. And again, it's not a depiction of the Christian devil, but it's a sign of ancient alchemists that essentially talk about the combination of forces like male and female, light and darkness, moisture and dry. And with the hand positioning, you can also see that it basically says something called as above, so below, which is famously on something called the Emerald Tablet, which is generally associated with King Solomon. Let's say the Emerald Tablet was created by Hermes Trismegistus. You can take this literally, you can take this metaphorically, allegorically, whatever. But what Masons like to do, typically speaking, is they fuse different deities or ideas together, like Jabulon, meaning Jehovah, Baal, and Osiris. And in particular with Hermes Trismegistus, it's like a combination of Hermes, the messenger god, and then Thoth, which is the Egyptian equivalent of Hermes. So Baphomet essentially means baptism or initiation into wisdom, and the reason why this is because Baphe is derived from Greek, which is like immersion or I dip, and then Métis is wisdom, skill, or craft, and ironically speaking, Masons refer to their techniques, secret handshakes, and all that as the craft. So, in Latin, the phrase tem op ab, temple omnium hominum abba, which is simply Latin for father of the temple, universal peace of men. You spell this backwards, and you get Baphomet. And Masons are all about reversing, mirroring, reverting, and perverting. And on a side note, have an obsession with spiritual paraphernalia and generally invert things for their true purpose. So this particular sign here you learn at 4th degree, otherwise known as Mark Master. And what this symbolizes is holding something called the keystone. And what is the keystone in Freemasonry? The keystone is something written with HTWSSTKS. Now, what does that mean? It means Hiram, the widow's son, sent to King Solomon. So, what happens is the 3rd degree, also known as a Master Mason, what happens when you get past the 3rd degree, that's all referred to as the Blue Lodge. It's kind of like having a white belt in martial arts. And Hiram Abiff is sort of like the Messiah figure, if you will, and he is revered because he supposedly died not giving up the secrets of a Master Mason to 3 individuals that they collectively refer to as the Jewees, Jewees. It's not pronounced Jews, it is Jewees, and it collectively refers to 3 individuals that wanted the secrets of a Master Mason, and Hiram Abiff died not giving up the secrets, and the 3 murdered him, and they used the 3 very tools that are actually displayed in the symbol with the Masonic G, right? You have a compass, protractor, you have a compass, a mallet, and a carpenter's square. So, interestingly enough, this is what the keystone all kind of represents, sort of like a holding of knowledge, if you will. And it's kind of funny how at the 4th degree you end up learning about the keystone, considering you pass the degree of a Master Mason where Hiram Abiff gets killed. So this is interesting. I don't know about this photo, what time period is taken in relation to the disgusting remarks that Jeremy Mackenzie had made about Pierre's wife. Although Pierre beyond overreacted in terms of calling the police to have Jeremy arrested in regards to this. Don't know if this is staged or not, but I just think it's interesting to see these sort of fist-pumping signs, if you will, which are also Masonic signs. So what does that mean? Well, it's kind of similar where what happens sometimes in this book is you'll see like 2 hands doing the same thing, but signs can be used interchangeably with just one hand as well. It's a little bit loose in the regard of like how in martial arts you have katas, which are like patterns of movements, and sometimes when those movements are actually used in combat, self-defense, and those sorts of things, they sort of change a little bit in nature and are not necessarily done the exact same way as per a kata. So, sort of the same with a lot of these fraternal signs here. And we can see 2 sort of fists in the air here, and when you see those instead of with fists but with open hands, it's like a sign of distress. However, when you have both your hands clenched like this, it's like saying the fists are both clenched in allusion to one of the penalties of the obligation, which is to have both hands chopped off to the stumps. Interestingly enough, okay? So, gonna move forward and talk about the rising moon sign now. What is the rising moon sign? Let's scroll down and find out. Which sign or moon sign used to salute the rising moon? Also used by surfers and football teams. Yeah, I've seen that quite commonly. And this is the sign that the Führer should be using to indicate the hook'em horns. And then this particular sign is an interesting one here. I'll show a picture of Christine Anderson with diagolon so you can understand what I mean here and why I'm showing this one in particular. And you learn this at a degree they call the intimate secretary. I'm not sure what numeric degree that is in Masonry, but we can see that Morgan got to meet Christine Anderson and, of course, Maxime Bernier. And we see these particular signs here as well. You have somebody right beside Christine Anderson who goes by the name Stacy Cowder, who I'll mention a little bit briefly. It was ironically Kellyanne Wolfe who mentioned Stacy Cowder, and as well somebody called Bethany Nodwell to me. It seems like people are very desperate in trying to out each other in order to save their own ass. But again, I don't know Kelly's true motives for actually telling me something like that. So, first sign, close the right hand and draw it from the left shoulder to the right hip. It alludes to the penalty of dissecting the body. So like a cut right across the body. And now we're going to move forward and talk about David a little bit. David, I'm not sure how to pronounce it. And I also don't know the legalities of writing on paper fiat currency. However, this also seems to be advocated by Bridget Belton, as we can see, and I'll be talking about her a little bit in the video. I don't know the legalities of this, if I'm honest, but I would not recommend doing something like this, as it would probably take cash out of circulation a lot faster. And if there are legalities revolving around this, then you're also asking for trouble. I'm all for protesting in and of itself. I'm not down for showing up to like a crowd like a protest, but I'm all down for voicing your opinion and for communicating what's actually wrong and spreading awareness, truth, that kind of a thing. And we can see that this kind of a thing as well is supported by Stacy Cowder, whose name was drawn to me by Kellyanne Wolfe, ironically. So David seems to support the unity event here, as we can see by that particular picture, and as well the truck convoy as a whole. He's got a mask of Anonymous here, which is interesting. I covered that in my Cafefe Bakery and Operations video, and I spoke a little bit about Anonymous and how that's a psyop, as well as Guy Fawkes, which is what that mask represents. And you have Anonymous here, Anonymous Canada, with the name Jason Goulet or Jason Lafaci Laface, who is a guy that actually openly claims to be a hacker, has threatened Rick Walker on Maverick Media openly, and Rick has displayed some of those clips in his videos as well. So I just think Jason's an interesting character, and definitely pretty ballsy to make threats like that on video for sure, but not ballsy enough to probably make threats like that in person. So, as well, he is affiliated with Diagolon, as we can see. And Diagolon, to my knowledge, is not, an actual corporation or registered organization of any sort. However, it is still mentioned on the chart, and it is some kind of movement that is playing a role. And people within that movement are probably affiliated and friends with Jeremy Mackenzie, whether they know him personally or not. You can see that this guy as well supports Vets for Freedom and the Canadian Democratic Defence Association, CDDA, which is led by Kellyanne Wolfe, to my knowledge. And I've mentioned them in previous videos. And I talked about Vets for Freedom in another video. I'll be talking about them as well in this video. This is David, and this is a certificate he received in acupuncture. Now, as well, Jeremy Mackenzie, DILF Records, which stands for Diagolon Imperial Liberation Front. They're supporting Chris Sky for mayor. I'm not going to go into the definitions of DILF or MILF, but I'm only bringing it up because Jeremy likes to hide behind a veil of comedy. I'm not going to cover sexual humor and whatnot in this video. If you really want to look at what DILF or MILF is on Urban Dictionary, then go for it, be my guest. In this Masonic Lodge group on Facebook, we see someone named John Gravy who's registered to it, who's a part of this particular group on Facebook, excuse me. And As well, his profile picture is that of Diagolon, which is interesting. And the reason why I bring up Artur Pawlowski here is because his name is actually on 2 different spots on the Coggle map. His name is over here, right beside Jeremy Mackenzie, and then we also see his name in relation to Misty Wind, Shingoose, and over it cross-connects to somebody named Brad Kerrigan as well. So Artur Pawlowski is interesting, being that he's in 2 spots in the map, and as well that he is using Knights of Malta symbolism over here, and we can see that the Knights of Malta and Jesuits are groups that infiltrate absolutely everything and control the narrative of history in the background almost all the time, except for events that predate those existences of those organizations. But you can always find that it's fraternities of sorts that are always pulling the strings, because in any sort of chart or diagram of sorts that displays something like pyramid of hierarchy with NGOs, government, and military-industrial complex and the such, fraternities are the glue that hold things into place, regardless of where they actually stand on those fake pyramids of hierarchy. And also, secondly speaking, they're nothing but cowards, because their techniques and things that they implore against us they all revolve around veils of deception, and essentially they're hiding behind either veils of corporations or through fraternal signs that I've covered in this video so far, which make you nothing but an overglorified coward as far as I'm concerned. So this is the steering committee of Vets for Freedom. Vets for Freedom is not a group that is on this particular chart. They were incorporated after the truck convoy in March, I believe. However, the reason why I'm going over this and showing you a visual of people is because in the current way the website is ran, everything is apparently under construction and there are no visuals of people. And I don't see all of these names in particular on the Coggle list, and as well, like I said, Vets for Freedom is not on there, but some of these people were definitely present in Ottawa during the truck convoy. And Tom Marazzo is a name that is on the list, lumped in right into the same category here as, let me just pull it right up. Tom Marazzo is right down here with Tom Quiggin, Chris Barber, Wexit, Tamara Leach, Bridget Belton, and several other names here. And there's Tom Marazzo's name right there. So interestingly enough, he's somebody that also shows up. And as well, we can see that Vets for Freedom as a corporation is actually incorporated through ISED and is put onto the Open Government platform. I'm going to explore what this platform actually is in the video, but again, like I said, they were incorporated after the truck convoy, so March 6th, 2022, and as well, the fact of the matter is that Vets for Freedom, or Veterans for Freedom, is something that, well, they follow Jeremy Mackenzie's Facebook, and they are affiliated with him quite directly. As we can see, they're all together sort of at like a little party here, and Jeremy Mackenzie is throwing up the sign of approbation, which is a sign of approval, or like saying yes. And then you see the rising moon sign here done by a gentleman named Jeff, and this is Tom Quiggin, who's right in the same sector of the several names I just mentioned on the Coggle list. So it's interesting enough that these are people that are directly affiliated with one another, even if not a member of particular organizations. So here, what happens is Jeremy Mackenzie is rebutting somebody, and he is saying that he'll remain with the fastest growing and most effective veterans advocacy and human rights organization, Vets for Freedom, in the country. So there, I guess you can see he is a member of Vets for Freedom. And as well, I'm going to move forward now and just speak very briefly about something called Mothers Against Distancing, but the Sudbury edition here. I'm not sure if it's related to the Coggle map directly. As we can see, Mothers Against Distancing is a name that is on this map here, and it's been something that has been affiliated with Chris Sky, as we'll dive into a little bit further. But first, the reason why I bring up the Sudbury location in particular is because one of the directors is somebody named John Robert Demelweek, who also goes by JR, and he also has this other corporation here called Demelvic Corp, which I don't know what it is in and of itself, and I don't know if it is still currently going. Oh, yes, it is still currently going, and it was incorporated February 8th, 2022, interestingly enough. So I'm going to go over some information about JR. This is a nice photo of him, I guess. And he works for Brandt Truck and Trailer, which is formerly known as Service Equipment Peterbilt, and he's the parts department manager. Mandy here is the wife of Jason LaFacci, or Jason Goulet, whatever his name actually is, and we can see that she's tagged JR in a post where she is cautioning him about needles in the forest or something, and then as well she thanks him for watching over the house. So it's quite apparent that JR and Jason Goulet and his family are tied together, and as well we can see that Jennifer Demelweek, who is actually the sister of JR in particular, is a paralegal, and she herself is acting as she's representing Caitlin Richer. I don't know if these cases are dropped yet or what the current information is, but this article in particular talks about Randy Hillier and a few others, so I think it's worth checking out just to see some of the players involved. I didn't see Randy Hillier's name on the list in particular, but some of the people that are mentioned in this article, I believe, show up on that Coggle list. However, I'm going to move forward and talk about ISED and open government and what this all means, especially when you incorporate in such a manner onto that website. It's a little bit different than just opening up any corporation. So the 2022 to 24 National Action Plan on Open Government Justice Commitment. So in 2012, Canada joined the Open Government Partnership, a global initiative that promotes open government principles and activities around the world. Countries who belong to the Open Government Partnership must complete national action plans explaining how they will support open government. And this action plan includes a justice commitment, and the commitment highlights a series of initiatives aimed at helping people and organizations across the country access the data, information, and services they need to identify and effectively resolve their legal problems. And these initiatives reflect our commitment to advancing a people-centered approach to justice. We're going to explore what they actually mean by that momentarily. However, I just want to explain a little bit more here. The Open Government Advisory Group. Justice Canada's OpenGov advisory platform is an internal advisory group that provides expert guidance and endorses the department's open government initiatives. This internal advisory group reports annually to senior managers within the department on their activities through a year in review report. Learn more by reading the Open Government at Justice Canada A Year in Review reports available on Open Government portal. So Justice Canada supports maximizing the release of non-sensitive data and information. In doing so, we proactively disclose data and information to the public that reflects our mandate to support the dual roles of the Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. Okay, so this is the people-centered approach to justice here and the Department of Justice within Canada. Justice Canada is guided in its efforts to promote access to justice by the UN 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals, whose overarching principle is to leave no one behind. Sustainable Development Goal 16, or SDG 16, commits the global community to work together to promote peaceful and inclusive societies for sustainable development, provide access to justice for all, and build effective, accountable, and inclusive institutions at all levels. Justice Canada is the lead department within the Government of Canada for achieving SDG 16. Now, I'm not sure what all of the 17 mandates are offhand, but the 17 Sustainable Development Goals are basically mandates for the Sustainable Development Agenda, which I've already covered in several videos. I don't think I have to explain what Agenda 2030 is by now at this point. But essentially, it's like a control over all avenues of infrastructure within the system, including that of food, which is the most alarming, tillage, livestock, and that sort of a thing. And this is the Minister of Justice here, David Lametti, by the way, co-founder and member of the McGill Center of Intellectual Property Policy. I think that that's worth looking into. He has a background in law as well. Go figure. I mean, if you're the Minister of Justice, right? So these are the 4 ministers that operate ISED, otherwise known as Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Canada. You have the Honorable Francois Philip Champagne, Marianne G., Randy, and Goody Hutchings. So when you have the Honorable in front of your name, it means that you're sworn into the Privy Council, by the way. So Philip Francois Champagne was first elected in 2015 as an MP for St. Maurice Champlain. He previously served as Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, and Minister of International Trade. He has a pretty long, big resume, so I'm just going to say a couple things about each person. And in 2009, he served as Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum. He served on several boards over the years and was notably president of the Canadian-Swiss Chamber of Commerce and the Banff Forum. Definitely worth looking into. However, it's interesting because the World Economic Forum in and of themselves pretty much penetrate every single political party in existence from what I can see, and they seem to have a foothold on public policy, the economy, and various avenues of infrastructure throughout by doing so, right? So Mary Ng, in particular, was first elected to MP in Markham Thornhill in 2017, and she has served previously as Minister of Small Business, Export, Promotion, and International Trade. Devoted community leader that has always believed in the power of public service. If you say so, you're actually doing a disservice by essentially working toward the sustainable agenda. But anyway, she has 20 years of experience in years of education, women's leadership, job creation, and entrepreneurship. And working in the Ontario Public Service, Ryerson University, and Ontario Ministry of Education led her to be recognized as one of Canada's top performing public sector leaders, and served as Director of Appointments for Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. How lovely. So, Randy here was first elected to the House of Commons in 2015, re-elected in 2021, and as well, he represents Edmonton Centre. Successful entrepreneur, community leader, philanthropist, leadership in business, public sector, service for the non-profit sector, and he's a special advisor to the Prime Minister on these particular Soros-funded issues, working with organizations across the country to promote equality for the LGBTQ2 community, promotes the rights of its members, and address discrimination against them. He continues to fight a more inclusive society and tackle discrimination as a co-founder of the Global Equality Caucus. How cringy, dude. Goody Hutchings. So, born and raised in Corner Brook, and she's proud to call Newfoundland and Labrador her home. She served over 30 years as a small business owner in the Atlantic Canadian tourism industry, and her community ties have made her a strong advocate for rural families and members. In addition, she served as an MP for Long Range Mountains, Parliamentary Secretary for Small Business and Tourism, and she engaged in tourism with tourism operators and advocates. And she's the Minister for Women and Gender Equality and Rural Economic Development, and helped create a national action plan to end gender-based violence. If that just includes simply flying flags, good job, I'm proud of you. Goody has the honor of being a founding member of National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians. Should have specified that was sarcasm on my part earlier. But anyway, she was appointed to Cabinet as Canada's Minister of Rural Economic Development in 2021. So the Deputy Minister of ISED, his name is Simon Kennedy, and he effectively had that role September 3rd, 2019, and he has taken a role in funding home care, mental health services, reforms to pharmaceutical pricing, nutrition labeling, vaping, tobacco, packaging, legalizing and regulating cannabis, including the passage of the Cannabis Act. And as well, he began his career in public service in 1990, served in a variety of different roles, including 6 deputy minister level appointments at the Privy Council Office, Industry Canada, Foreign Affairs and International Trade Canada, Health Canada, ISED, and as the Canadian lead on the binational Beyond the Border Working Group, he negotiated with the White House the 2011 Canada-US Action Plan for Perimeter Security and Economic Competitiveness, and he served as the Prime Minister's personal representative, or Sherpa, to the G20 from 2012 to 2014. Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to go over a large portion of the organizations that I found that are incorporated under ISED, and not all of them and not all of the names are on the COGL list. However, I think it's interesting because these groups are affiliated with some of the groups on the COGL list. So this is Canada Marches, Human Rights Education and Awareness, also incorporated through ISED, and the director is James Top. This group is affiliated with Vets for Freedom, doesn't appear on the COGL list. However, what I will say is James Top was present during the Ottawa convoy, and that's where I first happened to learn his name. This is Children's Health Defense, also an organization not on the COGL chart. However, one of the directors is Rocco Galati, whose name actually is on this COGL chart. So I'll be showing where Rocco Galati is. Let me just find it briefly. Yes, right over here with Police on Guard and Action for Canada, and we can see a nice link to Kellyanne Wolf. The next organization, Freedom Lovers Canada, is again not an organization that I saw appear on the list, but Vladislav Sobolev, or Vlad, is somebody who I've uploaded a little short video of him giving basically a little New World Order speech, and as well, he is one of the names that appears on the COGL list. Chris Weisdorf, or Weisdorf, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. I do not see his name on the COGL list, but he is affiliated with Adam Skelly, to my knowledge. And Adam Skelly is somebody who is on the list right over here. And you can see that Adamson's Barbecue actually is connected over through to the Line, actually, which connects right to Adam Skelly. And the Line is one of the many organizations incorporated under ISED. I covered that in my Cafefe video. But the other person I was looking at was Vlad in particular. Sorry, just needed a quick memory refresher there. Vlad Sobolev, we can find his name right over here with Brad Kerrigan, and we can see him quite close over to Hugs Over Masks, although Hugs Over Masks is on a different thread. But Vladislav has appeared to be linked to Brad Kerrigan somehow, and I don't understand how these people are linked and why they're linked together as such, nor do I understand the purpose of that COGL list. but I don't think it's something to disregard or simply not speak about whatsoever, because a lot of people seem to be panicking when this list is brought up. And the thing is, there are valid questions to bring up, and I don't just assume everybody on that list is controlled opposition or something. There's definitely a lot of shady people on that list that do need to be called out for sure. However, fact of the matter is, I don't know the nature of that list or its purpose for construction. I can only explain how I received it, which is in my previous video, and how that particular individual received it. So, first, we can see this particular corporation. I don't know what it is, but Norbert and Odessa are names that are on this list, and I covered them in my first video about sovereign citizen infiltration cargo list. You can see Odessa and Norbert, of course, being part of Liberty. They're tied right in here with Mounties for Freedom and Action for Canada, which is interesting. Now, Mounties for they're just actually tied right into Action for Canada here. Mounties for Freedom is what Daniel Bulford is a part of, and Daniel Bulford is actually right on the bottom here. He is within this whole mess of names, right, with Bridget Belton, Tamara Leach, Tom Quiggin, and a few others. So I'm going to move through the list. Again, I didn't see this previous corporation, but I did see Norbert and Odessa. So this is the line, which I already mentioned is on the list right over here, and I've covered them in various videos, Draw the Line with the Line, and as well they're given a mention in the Covfefe video. And we can see Lamont Daigle's name, Helen Vong, and George Roche. Next, Unify the People. And we can see names like Dallas Hills, and Unify the People is right in the corner here. I don't see names like Dallas Hills and all the names that are right listed as the director of the corporation, but all those names that are directors of the corporation do need to be looked into, as well as Unify the People, of course. I already covered a little bit about Unify the People and an organization called Constitutional Conventions that Dallas Hills is a part of in a video entitled We the People. Mothers Against Distancing, and we can see the directors are Christopher Sikosha, Jennifer Sikosha, and Kellyanne Wolf. So there's Kellyanne Wolf's name. Her name is Kellyanne Farkas, or Farkas. I'm not sure how to pronounce that, but Farkas or Farkas is Hungarian for wolf, hence why she chooses the name. And then we can see Mothers Against Distancing and Chris Sky. So this is Chris Sky's name right over here. I don't see his girlfriend Jenny listed. However, Mothers Against Distancing is directly affiliated with him, as we can see right on the list here. Although Kellyanne Wolf is also one of the directors, interestingly enough. Action for Canada. So I have a video entitled Freedom and Frugality where I've spoke about them as well. And I mention that Valerie Thomas, in particular, the co-founder, actually Valerie Price was listed as the co-founder. I'm not sure if Valerie Thomas is the same person or not, but Valerie Price is a member of the Knights of Malta, and Tanya Gaw herself works quite closely with Rocco Galati. Interestingly enough, Tanya Gaw's name is specifically mentioned here in direct correlation here with Kevin J. Johnson. Again, not sure of the link, but she is the head of Action for Canada, interestingly enough, and she's right over here within this little den of snakes, if you will. So the next organization to bring up is Elders Without Borders. Police on Guard as well is on the list, but we'll get there. Elders Without Borders, Michael Swinwood. Elders Without Borders, Michael Swinwood, also ISED. VCC, I can't actually say the certain first word without this video being taken down, unfortunately, but VCC is led by somebody named Ted Kuntz. So we see the name over there, and then we see Ted Kuntz, and goes right down and connects right to Rocco Galati, interestingly enough, who is listed as one of the directors of Children's Health Defense. And as well, Rocco Galati Liberty Canada, which is Odessa and Norbert. And so Rocco, VCC, and Liberty are basically covered very well on a website called Canuck Law. And Canuck Law has a YouTube channel as well, but she writes amazing articles as well. So I would give canucklaw.ca a check out. And as well, I would check out the YouTube channel. As well, there is a Telegram channel that Canuck Law has. So, right over here, going to move forward. Police on Guard. Is it a name that's on the list? Well, yes, I had already said so. And interestingly enough, out of its directors here, the name that I personally recognize, well, I recognize Chris Vandenbos as I know the face, but Terry Hadar in particular, I questioned her a long time ago when I actually questioned Maxime Bernier about his relationship to the social economy. And essentially, Terry Hadar I questioned on the same day, just at a slightly different time immediately after. And Terry Hadar runs something called Mama Bears, which is part of Police on Guard. And Terry Hadar, I tried to ask her about something called MOZUD. And MOZUD is a Canadian organization with primarily causes that revolve around the Middle East, like trafficking of Yazidi women in Iraq or Israel-Palestine type of issues. So, and MOZUD is connected with Police on Guard for the, I already connected that in my Police on Guard video, Policing for Freedom Part 1. However, when I questioned Terry about this, I think she thought I said Mossad, as in Israeli intelligence, and she had gotten quite defensive at that point. However, even though I wasn't asking about Mossad directly, the thing is, if you're unwilling to talk about the intelligence community, it shows that you're essentially gatekeeping, and the intelligence community infiltrates everything and plays a big role in what's going on in both sides of the narrative. The only things that I think are bigger than the intelligence community really are the Knights of Malta and the Jesuits, because those are fraternities that kind of hold the glue together of everything within the system that doesn't work for us, or they're the ones that operate intelligence communities and the ones who people in intelligence communities report to. So look at the Farnese residence, actually. In Italy, it's shaped exactly the same way as the Pentagon. And the Farnese family is essentially the founders of the Jesuits, along with Ignatius Loyola. We can talk about that in a previous video sometime. This is Canadian frontline nurses over here, also on the list, and part of ISED, interestingly enough. So here's what's interesting, right? A lot of these names that are on the list here all happen to be partnered with ISED in some way, shape, or form. And as well, too, a lot of the names that are on that list happen to be scrambling, like I said. And I understand having your reputation at stake or being worried about something. But at the end of the day, like, you're going to get attacked, especially if you talk about the truth. And I'm attacked all the time, and there are lies about me posted as well, and people are trying to take down my content as well. I'll have to branch out onto several different platforms. However, fact of the matter is, if you want to get down to the matter of the truth, I don't know why people are shying away from talking about this, especially people on that list. So in particular, I have some questions for Jason LaFacci and as well Bridget Belton. Now, I'm going to show some different images here. Jason Goulet appears to be affiliated with Stand for Thee, as we can see a comment of praise from Jane Sharf, who's part of Stand for Thee. And we can see that they appeared on Beth Martin's show together, interestingly enough. And I don't know the context for having taken the picture with Pierre, but I think it's just interesting one that I found and worth showing here. And as well, this self-proclaimed hacker, Jason Goulet, you can see his name at the top here because Dan Martin, one of the people employed to discredit myself and others, he is in direct contact with Jason Goulet and has interviewed Lamont from The Line. He has interviewed Helen in the same interview, and as well Morgan May, and as well Omari. So, who's a Toronto DJ, by the way. Jason Goulet appears to be in contact with Dan Martin because Dan Martin uses his phone, I think, to film videos. So you can see a message came through from Jason Goulet, interestingly enough. So I know who Dan Martin's affiliated with. And as well, we see Bridget Belton has some interesting friends as well, which I'll be talking about her a little bit. You can see she's quite close here with Vincent Gerses, who she's met. I think this is a particular individual from Vets for Freedom. I can't remember his name offhand. Jamie, I think. Colin Ross, who I've called out as well, who has ties to the United Nations quite directly through his organization, through an organization, We Make Impact. And his friend who runs that organization, Jimmy James Cohen, is actually part of the We Charity, interestingly enough. So, and We Make Impact, the United Nations affiliation that Colin Ross has, We Make Impact is directly in line with the Sustainable Development Goals, and they even say so on their website. And that's who Jimmy Cohen is, co-founder of that organization. So he should know better. This is Daniel Bulford, who as well is someone that shows up on the list in the same quadrant. Stacey Cowder, who Kellyanne Wolf pointed me in her direction, ironically. Tom Marazzo, who's in the same kind of quadrant on the list as Bridget. And as well, let's see, is there any other photos to bring up of note? Yes. You can see her with Freemason Roman Baber. I spoke about him briefly in my Colin Ross video. He's part of something called the Knights of Rizal. And then as well, Bridget Belton, she was part of the Ontario party of Derek Sloan, in particular, who's also a Freemason, as we can see here by this lovely handshake with, I think this is the ginger is James Coates. We can see them doing a lovely Masonic handshake together. So, organizers Chris Barber and Bridget Belton said they connected on TikTok and sprouted an idea to organize a protest against the federal DVOC coercive measures. Sorry for the choice of language I have to use. The DVOC coercive measures for cross-border truck drivers. So, this is kind of funny here because this is how Bridget Belton claims to have gotten together with Chris Barber, and I'll admit that in my truck convoy videos with an emphasis on con, I did not speak about Bridget Belton or Tom Marazzo. I did speak a little bit about Chris Barber, yes. However, there were so many different players and things going on and different people claiming to be organizers and whatnot, and it was very difficult to keep up with, and information was changing by the day as I was trying to cover it. So I missed out on speaking about Bridget Belton, and I'm not too sure of her involvement in the convoy quite directly. However, I do think she's worth a mention, being that she is on the list, and I think that she as well is somebody worth questioning in regards to her relationship with Chris Barber, because in particular that list was sent to somebody on December 7th, 2021. That's when the timestamp was verified according to my last video. So what's interesting about this is that I don't know the exact time period that they claim to have gotten in contact with one another, but they were obviously paired together on that list, because Chris Barber, in and of himself, actually, is within that quadrant here. We're going to take another look at it. Tom Quiggin, Chris Barber, Benjamin Dichter, Wexit, Peter Downing, Tamara Leach, Daniel Bulford, Bridget Belton, and then these various people, including Tom Marazzo and Jason LaFacci. A lot of those various people, like Chad Eros, for instance, Tamara Leach, Chris Barber, Chris Guerra, and Benjamin Dichter, all happen to be on this list here, which is kind of funny here. I don't exactly know the nature of this list and still have to explore it, but again, I think it's worth pointing out, considering fact of the matter is Freedom 2022, Human Rights and Freedoms, which is under that same quadrant, is something that is incorporated through ISED, basically formally Ministry of Industry, formerly Industry Canada, which is essentially a sustainable development ministry within Canada. I have this link for simplicity to show 5 different corporations that Derek Sloan has in particular. And Derek Sloan, you can find those organizations through OpenGov as well, interestingly enough, and he's listed as a director here. So I have more questions than answers, quite obviously. However, the big question I have here is, what's the freedom fighters' roles with ISED and open government? And why is it incorporated onto this platform? In order for open government to partner with the federal government needs to be on board with open government's agendas, which revolve around the Sustainable Development Agenda, which of course the Canadian federal government and open government are on board with one another. So why is it that through ISED, which you can see ISED has a relationship here to open government, why is it that various freedom fighters, if you will, are using this particular platform to have things incorporated? That's a really big mystery, considering everything here revolving around open government, federal government, and ISED all revolve around the Sustainable Development Agenda. There's actually a window of about 30 different projects, roughly speaking, of ISEDs that all revolve around sustainable development projects, such as the 7 regional development agencies, and as well as something called the SSHRC with Maxime Bernier. He has had relations with them in the past when he was Minister of Industry, and ended up submitting reviews of the social economy as well as data assessments to them. So this is definitely very strange in nature here and needs to be looked into much further, and I'm sorry I can't provide more clarity, but hopefully some of the various people that I brought up in this video can provide some clarity and perhaps talk about their affiliations with ISED, open government, and that sort of a thing, and the reasons for doing this. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Please take care. Thank you.